Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Journalism and New Media Studies, SOJNMS, Bachelor Programmes, Bachelor of Arts, Journalism and Digital Media, BAJDM, Semesteri, BNM 0 to 2 Techniques of Reporting, Block-1 Basics of News, Unit-1 Understanding News, 1.0 Introduction. We as human beings have an inbound curiosity as to the events taking place around us and the general know-how of the world order. Everyone is eager to know the what, who, where, when, and how of the events and incidents taking place. In addition, the curiosity of the future awaits every individual, in case the events and incidents are of recent occurrence and are of interest to a vast majority of people. It becomes all the more significant and necessary for them to look for further information about these events. By mending together the specifics of all the materials, some concrete, some blurred, and quite often valuable facts emerge. Whatever materialize from such information is often critical, and people need to know these and all possible details about these. Such type of information, therefore, is called news. The outline of the latest events or any useful yet unknown information falls under the spectrum of news. In this unit, we shall systematically define news and provide you with all the necessary perspectives on news. 1.1 Learning Outcomes. After you have gone through this unit, you should be able to times discuss the concepts and definitions of news, times describe the principal elements of news and news writing, and times examine various news writing techniques. 1.2 What comprises of news? It is said that news is difficult to define. However, news remains something that surprises the reader, listener and viewer, and will always remain so. Let us look at some of its definitions. Times most dictionaries impart the meaning of news as an account of a recent event or information that's not known previously. Times according to the Random House Dictionary of English Language, the meaning of news is a report of a recent event. Intelligence, information. Times the Oxford Dictionary says, news is the report of recent events or occurrences brought or coming to one as new information, new occurrences as a subject of report or talk. Times any important information coming from north, east, west and south, which deserve to be taken as news. Times Lord Northcliffe, the famous British editor, said of news, news is something that somebody somewhere doesn't want to print, wants to suppress. All the rest is advertising. Times news is essentially about people, events surrounding people, and places. Get the truth and print it, said John S. Knight, founder of a greatest Times US newspaper chain, adding, news is heavy on community service and Times society interest and mindful of the city's pecking order in civic and social affairs. Times when a dog bites man, that's not news, but when a man bites dog, that's news. Times news is what affects readers directly. Times news is a timely account of a recent, interesting and significant event. Times change. The passing of an era, old landmarks being torn down, new lifestyles replacing old, new attitudes on old questions, anniversaries of major events. Times a journalism professor of Stanford University, USA, Chilton R. Bush, defined news as the report of an event that a reader can and will understand. Times another pragmatic view in defining news says, news is an account of an event which a newspaper prints in the belief that by so doing it will profit. After reading the above varied definitions of news, you would have understood the broad nature and concept of news. But it is difficult to accurately define news. For, to be correctly termed as the news, any information must be factual, new and interesting. There must be facts to report. Without facts, there can be no news. It is important that these facts must be new to the reader, listener and the viewer. Again, news is what's being published on the news pages of newspapers and magazines, broadcast on radio and telecast on television networks, or put out on the internet. As William Metz, professor of journalism, University of Nevada, USA, says, while it may not be possible to describe it precisely in words, every news reporter must come to a personal understanding of nature of news, must reach some conclusion about its essence before it is possible to recognize news when it happens. At this point, it's also important to know as to what we mean by news, sense, or news judgment. Being able to identify what will interest readers is called having news sense, said a noted American professor of journalism, Wyford Hicks. The important assertion about news, which is even somewhat contradictory, is bad news sells more newspapers than good news. So, what would be the news today? Given the limits of space, time, and resources, what's important, what isn't, what's to be left in, what's to be left out? And in the age of internet infinity, who's to say what's news? Asks Wyford Hicks. Thus, it will not be an exaggeration to say that there are almost as many definitions of the news as there are reporters, journalists. Activity 1. Choose a newspaper. Make 4 boxes labeled I, most important news of the day, 2. Sports news, 3. Entertainment, 4. Major advertisement. Now, collect materials that fall under these 4 heads for a week from the same newspaper. Analyze the pattern after a week. 1.3 Elements of news. Let's now discuss the principal elements or ingredients of writing news. If you are consuming reading a news, you would surely notice that a news item or a news story is not written in a style or fashion we write our letters or essays or any other piece of writing. News has to be written, presented, or broadcasted in such a manner or style that the reader, listener, or viewer gets the most important information in the shortest possible span of time, without using excessive and redundant words for the same purpose. There are certain established factors of a standard news story. Some of the important elements include timeliness, proximity, prominence, dimension, consequence, conflict, empathy, adventure, and weather, among others. Timeliness, the time of occurrence of an event, is the most important element of a news story. People want to know about the event as quickly as possible. Report of an event that happened yesterday or the day before yesterday is generally deemed stale and often not considered fit for publication, unless it is of extraordinary nature or extremely significant in some manner. News may cease to be news after 24 or even after 12 hours in today's age of rise in digital media. It is news because it's new. Readers, listeners, or viewers very well recognize the immediacy and perishability as vital factors in newsfall and news reporting. For example, rupee plunges to all-time low of 82.33 against dollar. This news is relevant for a particular time period as the dollar value might change in just another hour. Proximity, closeness or nearness of an event or an incident to the audience, has tremendous importance for reporters as well as for a newspaper. Proximity could be geographical or relevance to the audience. The more local or closer the site where the event took place, the greater will be its importance to be termed as news. For example, Noida Twin Towers demolition, Noida Greater Noida Expressway, other routes to remain closed. This story would naturally be on front page in all the local newspapers, but may be positioned at the inside pages of the papers in Jammu, Bhopal, Guwahati, or Surat. A local angle to the news has greater appeal and greater relevance, prominence. If a well-known personality happens to be involved in the event, it will invariably make news. For example, if the Prime Minister strains his ankle while walking to the car, or a celebrity has a bathroom fall, it makes news. The important fact is that the famous, the infamous, and even the eccentric command a special appeal for audiences. Impact. Impact stands for the impact that the news have on people and how the story affects them. If the US President or British Prime Minister announces his plans to sanction military aid to Pakistan, it's bound to impact the Indo-US or Indo-British ties and also Indo-Pak relations. Similarly, if the Union government increases income tax in its annual budget or levies a tax on purchase of cars, that makes it a national news, human interest. Quite often, newspaper reporters come across situations which induce emotions of mercy, sentiments, or sympathy. For example, if a visually challenged person performs some daring act, such as scaling Mount Everest, or a bicycle rickshaw puller's son gets selected in IIM-IIT admission test, these are human interest stories. You may recall the incident when a 4-year-old child by the name of Prince fell in a wayside 30 feet deep well some years ago. The rescue work by the army personnel was put out live on many television channels. This was a live human interest story which attracted the interest of viewers all over India for many hours till the rescue act was completed. Conflict of any type, political, social, cultural, communal, among certain sections of society, difference of opinion among two or more political parties, conflict among some warring groups, or more of such conflicts, always make news, adventure, as mentioned earlier, tackling difficult tasks in a swift and easy manner by individuals. Always make news anywhere. Elderly woman's Himalayan expedition covering 4,841 kilometers concludes after 140 days at Ladakh, stating an adventurous plus human interest story for the readers. Novelty, novel, rare, or unusual incidents make news. Empathy, often, several events mirroring tragedy, humor, oddity, victory, failure take place now and then in our life. Quite a few of these happenings attract our concern or empathy. Incidents of flood, accident, a child falling off from the arms of its mother in a moving bus train and getting crushed under its wheels, all make news. Weather, climate, environment, weather, extreme heat, cold, rain, storm, pollution affects all of us and makes news. For example, the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami made news all over the world in so many countries, including India, as it killed nearly to 30,000 men, women, children, and wreaked unusual, unimaginable losses of property, animals and marine life. Climatic changes, different aspects of environment degradation, pollution as well as efforts towards environment conservation affect general public at large. Given above are some of the most important elements which often make news. However, there are always occasions when we find new situations arising and figuring as eminent news stories in the media all over the world. 1.4 News writing, principles and techniques. News writing is a style of writing oriented towards reporting news. As mentioned earlier, news has to be written in such a manner and drafted in a style that the main or the principal information is conveyed to the audience in minimum possible words and in short time with maximum effect. Therefore, the first paragraph of the news story, which is called lead or introduction, tries to present the gist of the event happening in about 24 to 30 words. We shall also briefly mention how to draft an intro lead and how many kinds of leads are there for writing the news. 1.4.15 Ws and 1H. The news stories are written using 5 Ws and 1H in the first paragraph itself. This is probably the first and the most important while writing a news item. The first paragraph of news, called the intro or lead, should contain answers to 5 Ws and 1H. Namely, who, what, when, where, why and how. This is the most cardinal principle of writing news and is followed all over the world. The first paragraph of the news item must clearly state as to who is the main actor, character, object, subject or concern of the event, which needs to be told or written about. Is it the president, prime minister, any minister, governor, a well-known foreign dignitary, or any other prominent person? The other 4 W's and 1 H are times what happened, times when did it happen, times where did happen, times why did it happen, times how did it happen. Depending upon the nature of the event, the reporter has to decide which of these W's is more important and crucial to the story. The time when the event occurs is extremely significant. Any event having impact on a large majority of people will also be of great import. For example, election results make for timely news. An accident or an important event make news for its timeliness. The venue of event also assumes great importance in a news story. For example, if the event occurs in Prime Minister's office, Parliament House, or in State Assembly, in mosque or temple, every place mentioned here has its own unique significance. Therefore, each W has its own importance in the context of the event which is reported. Incidentally, the 5W1H formula of writing the intro or lead is attributed to the late British author who lived and worked in India, Rudyard Kipling. He wrote for the daily English language newspaper, The Pioneer, then published from Lucknow in the 1930s. Kipling's favorite saying for writing news, based on this formula, was as follows: I keep 6 honest serving men, they taught me all I knew, their names are what, and why and when, and how and where and who. Given below are some examples to tell you as to how intros and leads can be drafted, based on the formula 5 W's and 1 H, when, on coming Monday, 15th August, at 8 a.m., the Prime Minister will address the nation on its Independence Day from the ramparts of Delhi's historic Red Fort. Where, from the ramparts of Delhi's historic Red Fort, the Prime Minister will address the nation on 15th August this year, the Independence Day of the country, at 8 a.m., WHO. Prime Minister will address the Independence Day function on Monday, 15th August, at 8 a.m. from the rampart of Delhi's historic Red Fort. What? On the Independence Day, on 15th August at 8 a.m., Prime Minister will address the nation from the rampart of Delhi's historic Red Fort. Why? As 15th August marks the nation's Independence Day, the Prime Minister will address the nation from Delhi's historic Red Fort at 8 a.m. How? From the ramparts of Delhi's historic Red Fort, Prime Minister will address the nation on 15th August, which marks the Independence Day, at 8 a.m. The reporter who has to decide which of the 5 W's is crucial and is key and really essential to the story, and of course to its overall development. It also depends on the fact as to where is the story being written from and where is intended to be published. The story needs to be angled to suit the local audience of the newspaper accordingly. 1.4 Point to the inverted pyramid. Another traditional technique of writing the news is in the form of an inverted pyramid. The first paragraph, i.e., the intro or the lead, contains the most important and main thrust of the news item. The body of the news item further expands, elaborates, and explains rest of the story. Therefore, the main points stated in the lead or the intro have to be supported by the facts in the paragraphs that follow the lead or the intro. Thus, if you view the story in the form of a figure or a diagram, it will look like an inverted pyramid as illustrated below. The most important point in the story should be at the top, followed by less important facts, with the least important ones coming at the bottom. Such a technique of writing a story is called inverted pyramid. Actually, the inverted pyramid technique is a very basic method of news writing. A question may now arise in your mind as to why should one work like this? The main argument behind it is that the news theme point should be wrapped up in one sentence or two-paragraph nutshell with summary high up in the story. Also known as lead or nut graph, important information near the top of the story, usually in one paragraph. Here are some more illustrations and diagrams to tell you as to how should the news story be constructed and written. These are borrowed from a famous book entitled Exploring Journalism, written by two most well-known American professors of journalism, Roland E. Wolseley and Lawrence R. Campbell. Illustration number 1. Pyramid A illustrates the form for a routine news story as it is prepared for print. Its lead summarizes the story, then the importance of information decreases gradually until the least significant material is at the end. B. This figure is a pattern used in writing the story chronologically and is usually employed with suspended interest features. The story begins with unimportant but hugely attractive details and broadens as it nears the climax. C. This figure may be used in building a story consisting of the elements of almost equal value throughout. Most important is the lead, least so, the final details of the story. Source: Exploring Journalism by Roland E. Wolseley and Lawrence R. Campbell. 1.4.3 Use of the inverted pyramid. It is believed that the inverted pyramid technique of news writing was innovated during the American Civil War, some 150 years ago. Prior to that, news items were written in the form of a narrative, somewhat like a fiction or as an essay, in a chronological style, the most important point coming in the end. It was during the US Civil War that the news writing style went through drastic changes. This was necessitated due to the fact that the most recent development in the progress of the Civil War had to be communicated through the Morse telegraphic mode in the first paragraph itself. And if it was put in the end of the write-up, as in the case of an essay or any other narrative, it could be lost in transit. Therefore, to overcome that danger, war correspondents started prefixing and putting the recent most war news in the first paragraph itself, which increased the chances of the news arrival or receipt at the news desk in the beginning of the message itself. Though the original reason for employing the inverted pyramid technique of news writing has gone into oblivion, most news items are nowadays written in this manner and style only. Almost universally, the inverted pyramid technique is also deemed to be a rational, technological, and typographical outcome of modern news writing necessity for the consumers who are busy in their lives' other important routines and can afford to spare very little time to go through the details of the long and elaborate news stories. They prefer to get their news as quickly and in the minimum possible time as the news media can deliver. This style of presenting the news facilitates the reporter to organize the facts of the story systematically and quickly. It is also convenient for the sub-editor to compose the story's headlines and make the news pages to attract the attention of the reader. In addition, it is time-saving for the reader to decide whether he is interested in going through the entire text of the news story. Thus, the inverted pyramid news writing style also suits news persons at all levels. 1.4.4 Inverted pyramid, a critique. Of late, some senior journalism scholars and journalists have started questioning the inverted pyramid style. According to a well-known American journalism professor and author, Christopher Passant, why should pyramid be inverted when the pyramid in its pyramid shape, i.e., the right way up, can serve the purpose perfectly and most befittingly? For, anyway, the primary objective of the pyramid as such is to show that the point in a news story is made in a descending order of importance. The news is deliberately written in a manner that the reader can stop reading when he has just satisfied her curiosity and desire to be informed about a particular event. Another implicit purpose of this style of news writing is to cut the story from bottom up without losing its important parts. A noted critic of the inverted pyramid philosophy, Professor William Metzoff, the University of Nevada, USA, feels that the inverted style has overstandardized the technique of writing news. He adds that as it is not a natural storytelling method because its climax comes at the onset, is predictable and old-fashioned. A former editor of the United Press International, UPI, Roger Tatarian, has pointed out that narrative news writing style leads will be more popular over summary leads, especially in stories reader has already heard over the air. Lately, the featurized style of news writing has started gaining acceptance over the traditional and weather-beaten inverted pyramid, especially in prominent American daily newspapers such as the New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, etc. As one former managing editor of the New York Times, Turner Catalage, also said about the diminishing value of 5 Ws and 1 H some time ago, once, it will no longer be necessary, as maybe, never was, to wrap up in one sentence or paragraph all the traditional 5 Ws, thus, there is need to caution against intensive use of the inverted pyramid techniques of news writing. Don't worship the pyramid, it's only a way of visualizing the most common structure of a traditional news story. The guiding principle in developing a story is what does the reader needs or wants to know. 1.5 Summary. In this unit, what is news and the various elements of news have been discussed in detail. We talked about the basic principles and important techniques of news writing. We all know that the inverted pyramid style has been the most popular style for news writing. In this unit, we discuss this style in detail. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.